first Nicole Lampert, who I know has written a piece in the Telegraph about this today. Nicole, nice to have you with us. And inaction is really central, I suppose, to what people are feeling at the moment.
Yeah, which is mainly, I have to say, anger, upset, of course, devastation, but anger, because it feels like we've been saying this for a long time. We've been saying that there is danger coming. We're saying that they're ramping up the rhetoric, that it's not that this is just the most dangerous attack, but there have been violent attacks, particularly since October 7, 2023. But even prior to that was an anti-Semitism problem, a growing problem. Yep. Since the October 7 attacks, it's been off the scale. Starting on October 7, there was a kind of bloodlust, and we almost saw that last night. I'm not sure if you actually saw the footage, but there were 40 arrests across these different anti-Israel demonstrations. They seem to have got more violent because they were almost like they were excited by the spilling of Jewish blood, and that's exactly what we saw on October 7. This kind of excitement, and there's anger because we feel like we said this is becoming dangerous, and we were ignored. We were ignored in universities, we were ignored by our government, by our police. They allowed them to get away with this hateful rhetoric, which dehumanised Jews, dehumanised the British Jewish community. I know people that have already left this country. I know people that are making plans to leave this country. And everyone I'm speaking to on every group is like, do we have a future here? Some of my family goes back from the time Oliver Cromwell let the Jews back in, from the first time we were expelled, which is like 400 years.
And while all this is going on, politicians are trying to find a definition of Islamophobia. I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff up, frankly. Maybe that's another issue, but there is a bit of a tie-in to that. And again, I have to repeat, Nicole, what I said at the beginning. I find it extraordinary that we don't get that sense of real anger from our politicians. I've always reminded, I know Donald Trump's not everybody's cup of tea, and he shouldn't always be the sort of litmus test of what is right and wrong. But you know how he would be reacting to this, and we don't get that. We don't get that burning furnace of fury from the bellies of our Westminster masters. It doesn't seem to happen in that kind of way. And today we had the Home Secretary and possibly even the Prime Minister almost asking nicely for people not to protest this weekend.
Yeah, it's and that's because they are afraid of this anger. There have been death threats against British MPs. We've had one MP killed by an Islamist terrorist. There have been death threats. There have been constituencies that have been burned. Many of them have been vandalised. The Labour MPs, and particularly the female Muslim Labour MPs, were at the heart of this. And it's almost like the thing that won't be talked about. Yeah. And that is this war within the Muslim community itself. I speak to lots of moderate Muslims who are very unhappy at the way that our government are cozying up to much more extreme Muslims, including the ones that are involved with the Islamophobia definition. These are often people that have used hateful rhetoric towards Jewish people and certainly towards Israel. And that's where we are. And until we call out this problem, and a bit like the grooming gangs, and I want to reiterate, this is not all Muslims. This is a minority of people. But until we are ready to call out the problem, we cannot solve it. And of course, as we all know, Labour has a problem with this, don't they? Yeah. Because they depend on the Muslim constituency. They're worried that quite a lot of their politicians almost lost seats, and they may in the next election. They're worried about the Greens and the Sultana Corbyn party if they ever stop fighting each other to even start a party. So they're fearful of this, and so they won't fight this head on. And that is the biggest worry of all, that they won't fight for us.
Listen, Nicole, it's sad that here we are in 2025 that you even had to write a column on this. I mean, you probably couldn't have predicted that some years ago, but thank you for outlining and reiterating the strength of feeling that you, the Jewish community and others have as well. I'd like to think most decent people. Nicole Lampert, journalist, Telegraph columnist with us on the programme. Thank you to her. Let's cross to Jerusalem. Caroline Glick is foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Caroline, good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. Just give us, if you would, firstly, an overview, the response from Israel on this and the Israeli government.
Thanks for having me on your program. I think it's very important to reiterate what Prime Minister Netanyahu said last night after the holiday here, after Yom Kippur was over here, when he commented on the shooting, the attack, on the terrorist attack in Manchester. And he said, look, when you give in to terrorism, as the Starmer government did by recognizing a Palestinian state after October 7th, then you're enabling, then you're facilitating it, then you're encouraging it, because you're telling them that this is what pays. This is what you get. When you feed this beast, it gets even hungrier and it goes after you. And when you've been, for the past 2 years, British authorities have been trying to appease the mob that has been rioting outside of Jewish synagogues throughout the country, throughout Britain, rather than stop them, and terrorizing the Jews of Britain rather than protecting them. And then going on endlessly about what is Islamophobia, instead of just enforcing the law and protecting innocent civilians in Britain, your own citizens, and allow them freedom of worship and freedom of congregation in your country, freedom to be Jews in Britain without fear. Right now, people are terrified. And this is because when you give in to terrorism, terrorism comes after you.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And of course, we have the extraordinary side, and this has been the case, as I'm sure you're aware, Caroline, for some time now, Jewish schools that have barbed wire fences and security guards outside of them, synagogues with men in high-vis jackets, parading the perimeters, etc. This was never meant to be our story. And when I say our story, I'm talking about the Western civilized world in the 21st century. It should not have looked like this, Jewish or otherwise. This should not be where we are at. And it's the lack of inaction from our politicians. You've rightly called it out. And of course, just to go back to that point you made a couple of weeks ago, we had Prime Minister Starmer recognising Palestine, in inverted commas, without even saying, because he could have tagged on the end, couldn't he? He could have said, if you release the hostage. He might have just said that. Not even that made it out of his lips.
No, it didn't. And it's not surprising. Again, when you've decided to go down the road of surrender, it's only going to get worse and more costly. And that's why after this happened, the rioters went outside of number 10 Downing Street and started attacking him and started terrorizing him, and had to be pushed away to Whitehall so that they wouldn't be right at the front door of the British Prime Minister on the day of this assault against Jews, on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar in Manchester. And this is what happens. He didn't get respite from it. He's going to get more demands and more demands, and that's why they're not going to stop their riots tomorrow on the Sabbath, calling for more placation of these terror-aligned or actual terrorist organizations that you have in Britain. And they're terrorizing not just Jews, they're terrorizing non-Jews as well, although it should be bad enough that they're terrorizing Jews in Britain. They're terrorizing everybody who dares stand up to them.
Well, they feel emboldened, Caroline, right? They feel emboldened,
exactly.
And they feel emboldened because of the words of our Prime Minister.
Not only, it's also the actions, the fact that a Jew who wants to protest against the hate and goes to an area where you have these anti-Jewish protesters who, by the way, congregate very often outside of Jewish institutions in Britain, he is detained by the police. He's blocked by the police, says that his Jewish appearance is a provocation. Yeah. This is crazy. And again, we're very, very sorry for the situation of the British Jews. It terrifies us. We care about them deeply, and we believe that they should have the right to continue to live in Britain if they feel that that's where they want to stay. It's their home. Yeah. And yet they're being pushed out. They're being pushed out by a lack of law enforcement, by a bottomless willingness on the part of the government to appease people who are calling for the annihilation of the Jewish people who are driving through Jewish neighborhoods saying, we're going to murder you, we're going to rape your daughters, and then nothing happens to them. Yeah. There's no consequence for the terrorization of British Jewry. It's very alarming. And then, of course, it spills over into egregious pro-Hamas positions being adopted by the government of Great Britain. It's very it's a very sad moment in British history, I must say.
And, you know, we've given the green light to people to go on these, they call them pro-Palestinian protests. They're really anti-Jew, anti-Israel protests, frankly, that have taken place almost week in, week out, with placards saying the most offensive things. We've now got this new chant of death to the IDF. We've got that going on. We've got the Rivers to the Sea speech happening. All of this horrendous stuff. I should say, by contrast, we are just days away from the second anniversary, of course, of October 7th. This weekend on Sunday in central London, there is a commemoration for that event. That will happen. It won't be anti-Muslim, it won't be anti-Palestinian. It'll be quiet, it will be dignified, because they always are when these things happen. That's how people protest, and that's how people should protest, of course. But it is important to mention that, because it is 2 years since many of your people were taken, raped, attacked, murdered, and to this day, many still held in horrendous conditions, some probably not alive, but still no full resolution to what happened that day.
That's absolutely true. You know, again, you have one side that's attacking and you have one side that's peaceful. That's what we had on October 7th. That's what we've had for 77 years of history here in Israel. We just want to live our lives. We want to develop our country. We want to build our home. We want to cultivate Jewish life in the Jewish homeland. And we are being constantly attacked by our neighbors who refuse to accept a peaceful Jewish state in their midst, just as you see these rioters in places like England who refuse to accept a peaceful Jewish community in their midst. I think it couldn't be more blatant, the contrast between peaceful kibbutzim, farming communities along the border with Gaza. We're just celebrating a holiday, and getting massacred, getting butchered by these people who invaded our country. And the same thing, people just wanting to go to synagogue and pray on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. And they have to either be guarded by a phalanx of riot police and soldiers, or, as we saw in Manchester, you have a terrorist who comes right up to the entrance of a synagogue with the full intent and carries out his intent of killing Jews.
Caroline, on that note, thank you for joining us. We will speak again, I'm sure. Caroline Glick, live in Jerusalem. She is Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.